She doesn't even have shoes that match." Victoria's voice sliced through the champagne-scented air like crystal shattering on marble. The wedding guests tittered behind manicured hands, their designer gowns rustling with shared amusement. Diane stood in her thrift store dress, her natural hair pulled back simply, feeling the weight of 200 judgmental stares pressing against her skin. Beside her, billionaire Jonathan Ashford remained steady, his presence a silent anchor. To everyone watching, she was just another charity case, someone John had picked up to soothe his conscience. But when the ceremony reached "I do," Tyler Ashford stopped mid-vow. He looked past his bride, past the altar flowers that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and his eyes locked on the woman they'd spent the morning mocking. He walked down the aisle steps, past his gasping mother, straight to Diane. Then Tyler Ashford knelt, and one word fell from his lips that turned their perfect world to ash: "Boss." The room didn't just go silent. It shattered. The woman they dismissed for her second-hand dress controlled the digital heartbeat of their entire empire. Hit subscribe, because the best revenge is watching people realize exactly who they underestimated. Because dignity doesn't need designer labels to destroy you. The women's shelter smelled of industrial detergent and something softer, something like hope struggling to take root in concrete. For Diane Winters, it had become an unexpected sanctuary, a place stripped of pretense where survival mattered more than status. Here in the donation room, surrounded by bags of second-hand clothes and mismatched shoes, she could fold shirts in peaceful anonymity, just another woman rebuilding from the rubble. Nobody asked about the life before. Nobody needed to know that 18 months ago, she'd walked away from a corner office that overlooked Manhattan like a kingdom, from a tech empire she'd built line by line of code, from a name that made venture capitalists return calls within minutes. When Jonathan Ashford appeared in the doorway that Tuesday afternoon, his $5,000 suit incongruous against the backdrop of donation bins and fluorescent lights, Diane knew immediately that her carefully constructed invisibility had finally cracked. His Bentley idled outside like a whisper of the world she'd left behind, and his eyes held the kind of recognition that went deeper than memory. He wasn't just seeing Diane, the shelter volunteer. He was seeing D.W. Winters, the woman who'd vanished from the tech world without explanation, leaving behind a company that bore her initials and a reputation that still made competitors nervous. 3 days before his nephew's wedding, John had finally found the friend he'd been searching for. And he'd come with an invitation that would change everything. The industrial detergent never quite masked the other smells: old coffee from the community kitchen, the musty scent of donated clothes that had sat in someone's attic too long, and underneath it all, the sharp tang of survival that clung to places where people rebuilt their lives from rubble. Diane Winters had learned to find comfort in these odors. They were honest, at least. No one here wore perfume to hide who they really were. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency through the mountain of donations, folding a child's sweatshirt with the same precise corners she'd once used to organize pitch decks worth millions. The muscle memory of competence never left, even when everything else did. A t-shirt. Fold. Stack. A pair of jeans, the knees worn through. Fold anyway. Someone would need them. "Diane, you got a sec?" Rosa, the shelter manager, appeared in the doorway of the donation room, her weathered face kind but perpetually tired. She'd been running this place for 15 years, and it showed in the permanent crease between her eyebrows. "Always." Diane set down a sweater, giving Rosa her full attention, a habit from her old life that she'd kept. When someone spoke to you, you listened. Really listened. Apparently, that was rare enough to be remarkable. "The new intake from last night, Shanice? She's having trouble with the job application kiosk. Computer keeps freezing on her. I know you're good with that stuff." Rosa trailed off, the question implicit. Diane smiled. "I'll take a look." 20 minutes later, she had the ancient desktop running smoothly again, had shown Shanice 3 keyboard shortcuts that would save her time, and had gently corrected the formatting on her resume. When Shanice asked how she knew so much about computers, Diane simply said, "I used to work with them," and left it at that. The truth, that she'd built enterprise software systems that ran global corporations, would have shattered the careful anonymity she'd constructed here. Back in the donation room, the small TV mounted in the corner droned through its afternoon programming. Diane usually tuned it out, But a phrase from the financial news segment caught her ear like a fishhook. Tech sector volatility continues as Winters Global Solutions operates without its founder. Her hands stilled mid-fold. On the screen, stock tickers scrolled past, and there it was, WGS, down 3 points. The commentator's voice continued, speculating about her disappearance, about whether the company could survive without D.W. Winters at the helm. They showed an old photo of her, power suit, styled hair, the confidence of someone who'd built an empire from lines of code and sheer will. That woman felt like a stranger now. "You okay?" Rosa had returned, following Diane's gaze to the television. Diane forced her hands to resume folding. "Fine. I used to follow that stuff. Old habits." Rosa studied her with the too perceptive eyes of someone who'd heard every story and knew when she wasn't hearing the whole truth. "You know, in 15 years of running this place, I've learned something. The people who end up here, they fall into 2 categories. Those who had everything taken from them, and those who walked away from everything. You, Diane? You're the second kind." Before Diane could respond, her burner phone, kept in her pocket, powered on but never answered, buzzed for the 3rd time that week. She didn't need to look to know it was James, her acting CEO, probably calling about the quarterly reports, about decisions that needed her approval, about the company's slowly hemorrhaging value without her visible leadership. She let it ring. That world could wait. It had to wait. Because she'd come here 18 months ago with a single question that still didn't have an answer. Was she anything more than the sum of her bank account? Did anyone see Diane Winters the person, or just D.W. Winters the brand? So far, the results were mixed. Here at the shelter, people saw her competence, her kindness, her willingness to do the unglamorous work. But they also kept their distance, sensing correctly that she was concealing something. Real connection required full honesty, and she couldn't offer that. Not yet. Rosa was still watching her. "Whoever keeps calling, they really want to talk to you." "I know." Diane pocketed the phone without looking at it. "But I'm not ready to talk back." "Fair enough. We all got our reasons for being here. Some of us just hide them better than others." Rosa turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Diane? Whatever you're running from. In my experience, it always catches up eventually. Question is whether you'll be ready when it does." The words settled over Diane like a prophecy. She returned to the monotonous comfort of folding, letting her mind drift to the meditation of simple tasks. This was what she'd come here for, the erasure of complexity, the reduction of life to its essentials. Sleep, eat, work, help, repeat. No board meetings. No venture capitalists. No quarterly earnings calls. Just the basic human rhythm of survival and service. Through the donation room's single window, grimy with city dust, Diane watched the afternoon light slant across the street. A few residents stood outside smoking, their laughter carrying through the glass. Mrs. Chun from room 14 walked past with her shopping cart full of cans she'd collected. Miguel headed out for his night shift at the warehouse. Normal people. Regular lives. The kind of existence Diane had never known, born into middle-class stability and catapulted into wealth so fast she'd never had time to understand what she'd lost in the ascent. That's when she saw it. The gleam of obsidian black metal, utterly incongruous on this street of check-cashing stores and discount groceries. A Bentley, rolling to a stop directly in front of the shelter with the predatory grace of a shark entering shallow water. Diane's breath caught in her throat. No. Not here. Not now. The driver's door opened, and a man emerged in a suit that probably cost more than 3 months of the shelter's operating budget. Even from this distance, even after 18 months, she recognized the set of his shoulders, the particular way he moved through the world like he owned it, because in many ways he did. Jonathan Ashford. Billionaire. Real estate mogul. Her oldest friend in the business world. The man who'd partnered with her to build his empire on the bones of her technology. The man she deliberately ghosted when she vanished from corporate life because she knew he'd be the one who'd never stop searching. And apparently, he'd finally found her. The donation pile slipped from Diane's hands, scattering across the floor in a chaos of mismatched fabrics. Through the window, John's eyes swept the building's facade, then landed directly on her through the grimy glass. Even at this distance, she saw the shock register on his face, followed immediately by relief so profound it made her chest ache. Her lips moved, forming a single word that Rosa, bustling back into the room, didn't hear but could probably read from the stricken expression on Diane's face. No. John moved through the shelter's front entrance like a visiting dignitary entering a foreign country, aware he didn't belong, trying not to make it obvious, failing spectacularly. His Italian leather shoes clicked against the scuffed linoleum. His tailored suit caught the fluorescent lighting in ways the resident's thrift store clothes never would. Even the way he held himself screamed wealth, that unconscious confidence of someone who'd never wondered where his next meal would come from. Every head in the common room turned to watch him. Conversations died mid-sentence. Diane stood in the donation room doorway, her arms crossed, her face carefully neutral despite the way her heart hammered against her ribs. She'd had 18 months to prepare for this moment. Apparently, it wasn't enough. Their eyes met across the shabby common room, over the heads of residents pretending not to stare. For a long moment, neither moved. The shock of seeing each other after so long, after everything, created a force field neither seemed able to cross. Finally, John spoke, his voice rough with emotions Diane couldn't quite name. Diane. Just her name. Not D.W., not Ms. Winters, not the professional distance they'd sometimes maintained in meetings. Just Diane, the way he'd said it 20 years ago when they were business school students with more ambition than sense. John. She didn't move from the doorway. You shouldn't be here. I've been searching for 18 months. I'm not leaving because you think I shouldn't be here. He took a step forward, then seemed to remember where he was, the audience watching this drama unfold. Can we talk? Somewhere. The common room is fine. Diane walked to the small seating area, choosing a worn couch that had probably been donated from someone's basement. If he wanted to talk, he'd do it on her terms, in her world. No private offices. No conference rooms. Just fluorescent lights and curious stares and the humbling reality of where she'd been living. John sat across from her in a chair that creaked under his weight, designed for lighter frames and lighter burdens. For a moment they just looked at each other, cataloging the changes. Diane knew what he saw, her natural hair instead of the sleek style she'd once paid hundreds to maintain, her worn jeans and simple sweater, the calluses on her hands from manual work, the absence of jewelry or makeup or any of the armor she'd once worn. She saw the changes in him too. New lines around his eyes. Silver threading through his dark hair. The weariness of someone who'd been carrying a heavy weight for too long. What happened? John finally asked, and the genuine confusion in his voice almost broke her resolve. The company said you resigned, but there was no announcement, no transition plan. You just vanished. I called, I emailed, I showed up at your apartment. Which I'd already sold. I know. I checked property records. Diane, I've had investigators searching. Do you understand how worried I've been? Rosa appeared with 2 cups of coffee, setting them down with deliberate care. Everything okay here, Diane? The protective tone wasn't subtle. Diane felt a rush of affection for this woman who'd known her less than 2 years but would still stand between her and a billionaire in a $1,000 suit. It's fine, Rosa. John's an old friend. Aha. Rosa's skeptical look said she knew exactly what kind of friend showed up in a Bentley. Well, I'll be right over there if you need anything. After she left, John managed a small smile. You've made an impression. People here judge you by what you do, not what you own. It's refreshing. Diane wrapped her hands around the coffee cup, letting its warmth ground her. How did you find me? Dumb luck. One of my property managers mentioned seeing someone who looked like you at a shelter downtown. I've been checking every shelter in Manhattan for months. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. Diane, please. Tell me what's going on. Did something happen? Are you in trouble? Is someone threatening you? The genuine concern in his eyes made this harder. She'd imagined this conversation 1,000 times, practiced what she'd say, but none of her rehearsals had accounted for how much she'd missed having someone who actually knew her. I'm not in trouble. I chose this. His face went through several expressions: disbelief, confusion, something that might have been anger. You chose to be homeless? Diane, you built a company worth billions. You have resources. Exactly. She cut him off. I have resources. I have wealth. I have power. What I didn't have was any idea who I was without all of that. She met his eyes, willing him to understand. Do you remember what I told you years ago? That the only way to truly know someone's character is to meet them when they have nothing? That's when masks fall, when people show who they really are. I remember. You said it at that charity gala where everyone was competing to make the biggest donation for the cameras. Understanding began to dawn in his expression. You're testing people? I'm testing myself. Diane set down her coffee cup. And yes, I'm observing how people treat someone they think can do nothing for them. The results have been educational. John sat back, processing this. Around them, the shelter continued its rhythms. Mrs. Chin shuffling past with her evening meal, Miguel returning to grab something from his locker, the soft murmur of the television playing the news. Normal sounds of a world that existed parallel to the one they'd both come from. 18 months, John finally said. You've been doing this for 18 months. Give or take. Your company has an excellent acting CEO in James. The board is solid. Everything runs fine without me. Diane allowed herself a small smile. Turns out I'm not as indispensable as I thought. Also educational. That's not true. WGS stock is down. Investors are nervous. Investors are always nervous. That's their natural state. She studied him, noting the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands gripped the chair arms. You didn't come here just to find me. You want something. John had the grace to look uncomfortable. Is it that obvious? We've known each other 20 years, John. You've got your I need a favor face on. Despite everything, he laughed, a real laugh that seemed to surprise him. God, I've missed you. Nobody else calls me on my bullshit anymore. Hazard of being a billionaire. Everyone becomes a yes man. Diane softened slightly. What is it? What do you need? My nephew Tyler is getting married this weekend. Saturday. Big society wedding at the estate. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. I want you to come with me. Of all the things Diane had expected, this wasn't it. You want me to come to a wedding? John, look at me. I'm not exactly society material anymore. That's exactly the point. The bitterness in his voice caught her attention. My family. Diane, they've become something I don't recognize. Tyler's marrying a woman named Victoria Hartford, and the whole thing feels wrong. Too transactional. Too much about merging wealth and social standing. I look at my sister Margaret, at Victoria's mother Pauline, at all of them, and I see people who've forgotten what it means to be human. Diane began to see where this was going. And you want to test them. I want them to show me who they really are. John leaned forward again, his eyes intense. You once told me that theory. Let's prove it. Come to the wedding as my guest. Don't tell them who you are. Just be Diane, a woman I invited. And let's see how they treat someone they think has nothing. John, that's not fair to them. Fair. His voice rose slightly, and he visibly controlled it. Diane, last month I watched Margaret literally step over a homeless man on the street. She laughed about it later at dinner. At dinner. Tyler seems different, but he's marrying into a family that treats the staff like furniture. I'm ashamed of them. I'm ashamed that I've enabled this by making excuses and looking the other way. Diane understood shame. She'd felt it herself, looking at the tech industry she'd helped build, seeing how it had prioritized profit over people, efficiency over humanity. That shame had been part of what drove her here, to this shelter, to this stripped-down existence. What if I say no? Then I'll go alone and continue being complicit in their awfulness." John's voice went quiet. "But I don't want to be that person anymore. I want proof, one way or another, of who my family really is. And if they fail this test, I want to be done with them." That's a hell of a thing to put on a wedding. "I know." They sat in silence. Through the window, Diane could see John's Bentley, already attracting attention from people on the street. A different world, parked right outside. All she had to do was walk out that door and she could reclaim it. Her company, her wealth, her power, everything she'd walked away from. But John wasn't asking her to reclaim that world. He was asking her to walk into it as she was now, powerless, invisible, unimportant by their metrics. He was asking her to be the test. "Tell me the real reason," Diane said quietly. "Not the noble reason about testing your family. The real one." John's face crumpled slightly, the mask of a confident billionaire slipping to show the tired, disappointed man underneath. "Because if they can't treat a homeless woman with basic human dignity, then everything I've built, everything our families represent, all this wealth and power, it's worthless. It's worse than worthless. It's corrupting. And I need to know if there's anything worth saving, or if I should burn it all down and start over." There it was. The truth. John wasn't testing his family. He was trying to decide whether to destroy his own empire. Diane thought of her father, dead 10 years now, who'd worked construction his whole life and never made more than $50,000 in a year. She thought of what he told her when she got her first big contract. "Money doesn't change who you are, baby girl. It just reveals it. Make sure you like what gets revealed." "Okay," she heard herself say. "I'll go." John's relief was visceral. "Thank you, Diane, but I have conditions." She held up a hand. "If I do this, you tell me the whole truth about what's going on with your family." And John, she looked at him hard, using the voice that had once commanded boardrooms full of skeptical investors. "I know you well enough to know you're planning something beyond just observation. So whatever it is, whatever you're really doing, I'm in it with full knowledge or I'm not in it at all." He had the decency to look caught. "I may have mentioned to Margaret that I'm bringing a guest. And I may have deliberately not told her anything about you. And there may be a chance that Tyler will recognize your name from the quarterly reports, since your company holds significant contracts with Ashford Properties." Understanding clicked into place. Tyler will know who I am. Eventually. Probably not at first. But yes, the truth will come out. John met her eyes. "And when it does, my family will have to face exactly how they treated someone who's essentially a major stakeholder in their empire. Someone they depend on. Someone they should have treated with respect regardless, but definitely someone they shouldn't have dismissed." Diane should have felt manipulated. Should have been angry at being used as a pawn in John's family chess game. Instead, she felt something else, curiosity. Because wasn't this exactly what she'd been trying to understand? How people treated those they perceived as powerless. What happened when the power dynamics suddenly reversed? "This is going to be a disaster," she said. "Probably. Your family is going to hate me. They're going to hate themselves when they realize what they've done." John's smile was grim. "Or they're going to prove themselves utterly irredeemable. Either way, I'll know." "And Tyler? The groom? That's the wild card. I genuinely don't know how he'll react. He's the only one who might surprise me." John stood, extending his hand. "So we have a deal? You'll be my date to the wedding from hell." Diane took his hand, feeling the familiar grip of an old partnership. "On one condition. I pick what I wear. No designer dress, no makeover montage, no Pygmalion moment. I show up as I am now, or not at all. Deal." He pulled her into a hug, the first real physical contact they'd had in almost 2 years. "God, I've missed you." "I've missed you too," Diane admitted into his shoulder. "Even though you're absolutely insane for doing this. Takes one to know one. You're the woman who chose to be homeless to find herself." Fair point. When they separated, Rosa was watching from across the room with an expression that suggested she'd heard at least some of the conversation. Other residents were making no effort to hide their interest. In the shelter, everyone knew everyone's business. Privacy was a luxury they'd all given up along with their former lives. John pulled out his phone. "The wedding is Saturday at 3. I'll pick you up at noon. Give us time to." "John." Diane stopped him. "They already know you're coming to get me, don't they? Your family." His expression turned sheepish. "Margaret called while I was driving here. She wanted to know who I was bringing. I may have told her I'd invited someone special. She asked if it was someone they knew. I said not yet, but they would." "You really are trying to create maximum chaos." "I prefer to think of it as social engineering. You know, your specialty." Despite everything, Diane laughed. This was insane. She was agreeing to walk into a society wedding, a world that had chewed up and spit out people like her parents, a world she'd clawed her way into through brilliance and work ethic, a world she deliberately left because it had started to poison her soul. And she was going to do it powerless, vulnerable, exposed. But maybe that was exactly what she needed. She'd spent 18 months trying to understand who she was without wealth. Maybe it was time to test who she could be when facing wealth from the outside. "Saturday at noon," she confirmed. "And John? Whatever happens, promise me one thing." "Anything." "That we'll both walk away with our integrity intact. No matter what your family does or says, no matter how they treat me, we don't lower ourselves to their level. We show them what dignity looks like. Deal?" John's smile was real this time, reaching his eyes. "Deal." After he left, Bentley purring away down the street like a retreating predator, Rosa appeared at Diane's elbow. "So, that was interesting. That's one word for it. You want to tell me what you just agreed to?" Diane looked at the shelter around her, this place that had been home, sanctuary, laboratory for 18 months. She'd come here to disappear. Apparently, she was about to reappear in the most spectacular way possible. "I agreed to be a mirror," she said finally. "And mirrors don't lie. They just show people what's already there." Rosa studied her with those two knowing eyes. "Just make sure you're ready for what gets reflected back." The dress hung on the back of the donation room door like a question Diane wasn't sure she wanted to answer. Simple black, knee-length, cap sleeves. It had come in yesterday's donation haul, probably from someone's closet purge, still with the consignment shop tag attached, $15. Rosa had pulled it aside immediately, held it up to Diane with a knowing look. "For Saturday," was all she'd said. That was Thursday afternoon. The wedding loomed 48 hours away, close enough now that Diane's stomach had developed a permanent knot of anxiety. She'd faced down hostile investors, negotiated with cutthroat competitors, presented to boards that wanted her to fail. None of that had made her hands shake the way they did now, watching that black dress sway slightly in the ventilation breeze. "It's not too late to back out." Rosa appeared in the doorway, 2 cups of coffee in hand, her solution to everything. "Just call your friend John. Tell him you changed your mind. Nobody would blame you." "I would blame me." Diane accepted the coffee, grateful for something to hold. "I told him I'd do this." "Mm-hmm. And you're doing it because—" That was the question, wasn't it? Diane had been asking herself the same thing for 2 days, and the answers kept shifting. Because John needed her. Because she was curious. Because after 18 months of hiding, some perverse part of her wanted to face the world she'd left. Because she needed to prove something to herself, though she wasn't entirely sure what. "You ever feel like you're 2 different people?" Diane asked instead of answering. "Like there's who you are, and who you were, and you can't quite figure out how they fit together?" Rosa settled into the folding chair across from her, the one with a slightly bent leg that made it wobble. "Honey, everyone in this shelter is living that reality. We've all got a before and an after. The trick is deciding which one gets to define you. What if neither one does? What if you're trying to be something new entirely? Then you're braver than most." Rosa sipped her coffee, eyes sharp over the rim. But you can't build something new without understanding the foundation. And it seems to me like you've been avoiding the foundation for a while now. The observation hit closer than Diane liked. She'd spent 18 months stripping away the trappings of D.W. Winters, living as just Diane, telling herself she was finding her authentic self. But had she been finding it, or just hiding from the parts she didn't want to face? I wasn't always well off, Diane heard herself say. My parents, my dad was a construction worker. My mom cleaned houses. They saved every penny to send me to state college. I was the first person in my family to graduate, the first to build something, the first to... She trailed off. The first to forget where I came from. Rosa's expression softened. And that's why you're here. Not just to test other people. To punish yourself a little. Maybe. Or maybe to remember. To understand what it's like to actually need help instead of being the one everyone comes to. Diane set down her coffee. Do you know what it's like to have so much power that you forget what vulnerability feels like? To be so insulated by wealth that you lose touch with how most people actually live. Can't say I do. Rosa's dry tone made Diane laugh despite herself. But I know what it's like to lose everything and have to rebuild from nothing. And I can tell you, the people who make it through that? They're the ones who accept help when it's offered and give it back when they can. You've been doing the second part just fine here. Maybe this wedding is your chance to do the first. I don't follow. Accepting help means letting people see you vulnerable, powerless, in need. Sounds to me like that's exactly what you'll be doing Saturday. Rosa stood, collecting the coffee cups. Now let's figure out what you're going to do with your hair, because that dress deserves better than a simple ponytail. For the next hour, Rosa worked on Diane's natural hair with a skill that revealed yet another hidden depth to this remarkable woman. Worked in a salon before all this, Rosa explained, her fingers deftly twisting and pinning. It's like riding a bike. You never forget. You don't talk much about your before, Diane observed, watching in the small mirror they'd propped against the wall. Not much to tell that matters now. Had money, lost it. Had a husband, lost him. Had a house, lost that too. Bad investments, worse marriage, perfect storm. Rosa's hands never stopped moving. Took me 5 years to stop being angry about it. Another 3 to actually be grateful. Grateful. For the clarity. When you have everything, you never know who really cares about you versus who cares about what you can do for them. When you lose everything, that question answers itself real quick. Rosa stepped back, examining her work. There. You look beautiful. Simple, dignified, yourself. Diane studied her reflection. Rosa had created something elegant but unfussy, her natural texture showcased rather than fought against. With the black dress, simple jewelry, borrowed from Rosa, and minimal makeup, she'd look presentable but clearly not wealthy. Perfect for John's test. Thank you, Diane said softly, for all of this. Don't thank me yet. Wait until you survive Saturday. But Rosa's smile was warm. Though something tells me you're going to do more than survive. You're going to show those people what real class looks like. That evening, John called. Just confirming for Saturday. Noon pickup. I'll be ready. Diane paused. John, are you sure about this? It's not too late to just bring a normal date and have a normal time. His laugh was hollow. Normal? Diane, nothing about my family is normal. You'll see. Then, more seriously, I had dinner with Tyler tonight. The groom. And he's nervous. Really nervous. And not just normal wedding jitters. When I mentioned I was bringing someone, he actually looked relieved. Like he wanted a distraction from his own ceremony. John's voice carried worry. I think he's having doubts about Victoria. Real doubts. But the wedding machine is already in motion, and you know how that goes. Easier to go through with it than call it off. Diane knew exactly how that went. She'd watched colleagues, friends, even family members marry the wrong people because the invitations were sent, the deposits paid, the expectations set. The social pressure of wealth demanded certain performances, and backing out of a society wedding would be seen as a scandal worse than a bad marriage. "Maybe our little demonstration will give him perspective," she said. "That's what I'm hoping. Or it'll blow up everything spectacularly." John sighed. "My sister called 3 times today. She's fishing for information about you. I told her you're someone important to me and to mind her manners." "I'm sure that went over well." "About as well as you'd expect. She's already planning to be awful. I can hear it in her voice." He paused. "Diane, if at any point this becomes too much, we leave. Just say the word and I'll get you out of there." "I'll be fine, John. I've handled worse than some society snobs looking down on me." "Have you, though? Because I'm realizing that I'm asking you to walk into a room full of people who are going to judge you, dismiss you, possibly humiliate you, and you won't have your usual armor. No corporate reputation, no title, no obvious wealth. Just you." He was right, and they both knew it. But Diane had spent 18 months preparing for exactly this, to exist in the world without her armor, to see if there was anything underneath worth respecting. "Just you is all any of us really have in the end," she said. "The rest is just decoration." After they hung up, Diane sat in the gathering dark of the donation room, watching the city lights flicker on outside. Tomorrow was Friday. One more day of normal shelter routine. One more day of being anonymous Diane, the volunteer who was good with computers and kind to everyone and kept to herself. Then Saturday would come, and she'd walk into the Ashford estate knowing exactly what awaited her. The stares. The whispers. The judgment. The casual cruelty of people who'd spent their whole lives believing their wealth made them better than others. A memory surfaced. Her father, coming home from a construction job where the architect had talked down to him all day, treating him like he couldn't understand basic concepts. Her father, who could look at a blueprint and spot engineering problems the architect had missed. Her father, who'd sat at their kitchen table and told 10-year-old Diane, "Character is who you are when no one important is watching. And how you treat people who can do nothing for you. Don't ever forget that, baby girl." She'd built an empire on technical skill and business acumen. But her father's lesson was the real test she'd been avoiding. Not whether she could succeed with power, but whether she could maintain dignity without it. And whether she could witness others failing that test without becoming bitter. Rosa found her there as full dark settled over the city. "You're thinking too much. I can hear it from down the hall. Just remembering my dad. He would have liked this place. Would have volunteered here every weekend. Probably fixed all the broken things. Treated everyone with respect regardless of their circumstances. Sounds like a good man. The best. He died before he could see what I built with the company. Sometimes I'm glad. I don't think he would have liked what I became toward the end. Too focused on profit, not enough on people. Too comfortable with the compromises you make in that world. And now you're going back to that world for a day. Now I'm going back to that world to hold up a mirror." Diane stood, stretching muscles tight from sitting too long. "My dad used to say that the rich and poor aren't that different. They both bleed, both hurt, both need love and dignity. The only difference is how much they've forgotten that truth. Saturday, I'm going to remind some very rich people what they've forgotten." Rosa pulled her into a hug, unexpected but welcome. "Just remember you're not alone in this. You've got John, you've got your own strength, and you've got all of us here rooting for you. All of you. Honey, the whole shelter knows by now that you're going to some fancy wedding Saturday. Half the residents have offered to loan you jewelry or shoes or advice. Your family here. We protect our own." The words hit Diane harder than expected. Family. When had she last felt that? Her parents were gone. She had no siblings. Her corporate world was full of associates and partners and colleagues. But family? Real family built on mutual care and shared struggle? That had been missing for so long she'd forgotten what it felt like. Friday passed in a blur of normal activities that felt anything but normal. Diane helped with breakfast service, did her shift in the donation room, fixed Mrs. Chen's laptop, mediated a dispute between 2 residents over television privileges. The mundane rhythms of shelter life that had become comfortable, even precious. But underneath it all ran a current of anticipation. Tomorrow. Tomorrow she'd step into the lion's den. Tomorrow the masks would fall. Tomorrow she'd find out if John's family had any humanity left beneath their wealth, if Tyler was worth saving from his own wedding, if she herself could face that world without being pulled back into it. That evening, John called again. Margaret just cornered me. She's seen the guest list, noticed I'm bringing a +1, and she's losing her mind trying to figure out who you are. Did you tell her? I told her your name is Diane Winters and that she should treat you with respect. She Googled you, but of course there are hundreds of Diane Winters and she has no way of knowing which one is you without your business profile popping up. Which won't happen since I scrubbed most of my personal online presence when I left. Exactly. She's going insane trying to place you in the society hierarchy. Rich? Poor? Connected? Nobody? It's actually hilarious watching her spiral. John's amusement faded. But Diane, it also confirms what I suspected. She's already planning how to treat you based on your perceived status. The judgment has already started, and she hasn't even met you. That's the whole point, isn't it? To show that they judge before knowing, dismiss before understanding. Yeah. Doesn't make it easier, though. After they hung up, Diane laid out her outfit for tomorrow. The black dress. Simple flats, the only shoes she had that were appropriate, and they didn't quite match the dress. Rosa's borrowed pearl earrings. A small clutch purse someone had donated last month. She looked at the ensemble and saw exactly what the Ashford family would see. Poor, trying her best, clearly out of her depth. Not enough. Never enough. But her father's voice echoed in her mind, "You are enough, baby girl. Always have been, always will be. Don't let anybody tell you different." Tomorrow, she'd find out if she still believed that, and whether anyone else could see it too. Saturday morning dawned clear and cold. Diane dressed carefully, each piece of clothing a choice, a statement. This is who I am. This is what I'm worth. Judge accordingly. Rosa did her hair again, her fingers gentle and sure. You're going to be magnificent, she said softly. Not in spite of how you look, but because of who you are. At 11:30, Diane stood in the shelter common room, waiting. Other residents had gathered, offering encouragement, last-minute advice, hugs. Mrs. Chun pressed a wrapped piece of her homemade candy into Diane's hand. For luck, she said in her accented English. Miguel gave her a fist bump. Show them what real class looks like. When the Bentley pulled up at exactly noon, a small cheer went up from the residents watching through the window. John stepped out, and this time he didn't look out of place. He looked like exactly what he was, a man coming to collect someone precious. He opened the car door for Diane, his eyes taking in her simple outfit, her dignified posture, the quiet elegance Rosa had created. You look perfect, he said. I look poor, Diane corrected. Which is the point? No. You look like someone who doesn't need designer labels to have dignity. There's a difference. As they pulled away from the shelter, Diane looked back to see Rosa and the others waving. Her family, sending her off to battle. The thought steadied her. Ready? John asked. Diane thought of her father, of her year and a half in the shelter, of every lesson she'd learned about worth and dignity and what really mattered. She thought of the Ashford family, waiting to judge her, to find her lacking, to prove John's worst fears about what they'd become. Ready, she said. But then John's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, grimaced. It's Margaret. He answered on speaker. His sister's voice filled the car, sharp with anxiety and something darker. John, where are you? The wedding starts in 3 hours, and we need to discuss seating arrangements. You never told me if your guest has dietary restrictions or... Margaret, we'll be there in plenty of time. Yes, but who is she? I need to know where to seat her, who to introduce her to. Is she someone we know? Someone important? John's eyes met Diane's. She's important to me. That should be enough. That's not, John, you know how these things work. I need context. Is she from one of the good families? Does she have connections we should know about? You'll meet her when we arrive, Margaret. And I expect you and everyone else to treat her with respect and kindness. Can you manage that? The pause told them everything. When Margaret spoke again, her voice was tight. Of course. We're always welcoming to guests. Though I must say, all this mystery is quite unlike you, John. Maybe I'm tired of being predictable. After he hung up, silence filled the car for several moments. Finally, Diane spoke. She's already decided how to treat me, based on nothing but her inability to place me in her social hierarchy. I know. John's hands tightened on the steering wheel. This is it, Diane. Last chance to turn back. I can take you back to the shelter right now, go to this wedding alone, and we can both pretend this insane plan never happened. Diane looked out the window at the city passing by. Somewhere in that sprawl were thousands of people like those at the shelter, struggling, invisible, dismissed by people who'd never once wondered what circumstances had led them there. And somewhere ahead was a family who'd apparently forgotten that those people were human beings deserving of dignity. Keep driving, she said. It's time to hold up the mirror. Let's see what reflects back. The Bentley merged onto the highway, carrying them toward the Ashford estate, toward the wedding, toward a confrontation 18 months in the making. Diane's hands were steady now. Her heart was calm. She was ready to show them who she was. All of her. The brilliant CEO and the humble volunteer. The billionaire and the homeless woman. The complexity that defied their simple categories. And if they couldn't see it, couldn't value it, couldn't treat her with basic human dignity, then John would have his answer about what his family had become. And Diane would have hers about whether that world was worth returning to at all. The Ashford estate rose like a monument to excess. Marble columns, manicured gardens, valets in crisp uniforms. As John's Bentley pulled up, Diane caught her reflection in the tinted window. Simple black dress, mismatched shoes, borrowed earrings. She looked exactly like what she was, someone who didn't belong. Margaret materialized at the entrance, her designer gown shimmering. Her eyes swept Diane head to toe, cataloging every deficit. John. And this must be your guest. The pause before guest was deliberate, cutting. Margaret, this is Diane Winters. Diane, my sister Margaret. How charming. Margaret's smile never reached her eyes. Welcome. We accommodate all types here. The emphasis on all types landed like a slap. Inside, the receiving line waited. Victoria, resplendent in white lace, stood surrounded by bridesmaids like a queen with her court. When Diane approached to offer congratulations, Victoria literally stepped backward. "Oh, honey," Victoria's voice carried across the foyer. "Did someone let you in from the service entrance by mistake?" The bridesmaids giggled. Camille, the maid of honor, stage whispered, "I didn't realize this was a charity event." Diane smiled serenely. "Congratulations on your wedding. I hope your marriage has more grace than your manners." Victoria's mouth fell open. John's jaw clenched, but Diane touched his arm gently. "Don't. Let them show who they are." An usher approached, eyeing Diane's outfit with barely concealed disdain. "Family and honored guests are in the front section. You'll be in overflow seating." He led them to chairs partially hidden behind a decorative column. Diane sat in her assigned invisibility while John fumed beside her. Through the crowd, she glimpsed Tyler, the groom, distracted, checking his tablet obsessively. Whatever he was reading made his face go pale. His eyes swept the room, searching, until they landed on Diane in the back. His expression transformed from confusion to recognition to absolute terror. From her column-obscured seat, Diane watched the pre-ceremony reception unfold. Guests air-kissed, displayed status, performed wealth. She was an anthropologist observing a foreign species, beautiful, cruel, hollow. She went to get water. At the refreshment table, Pauline Hartford, Victoria's mother, held court with society women, voices pitched to carry. "Did you see what Jonathan brought? Homeless, by the looks of it. Some charity case. How embarrassing for the family." Perhaps she's a tax write-off, someone suggested. Cruel laughter. Diane reached past them for a bottle. Conversation died instantly. She met Pauline's eyes. I may be homeless, but at least I'm not bankrupt where it counts. Walking away, she heard sputtering outrage. John found her, face tight with anger. We can leave. I've seen enough. No. We stay. You wanted a mirror. Let's see what else it shows. The ceremony began. Victoria floated down the aisle, triumphant. But Tyler stood sweating at the altar, eyes fixed on Diane, his tablet conversation clearly replaying in his mind. He'd figured it out. Somehow he knew. Father Bennett began, "Dearly beloved." Tyler's hands shook. His eyes kept finding Diane in the back, over and over, like a drowning man spotting shore. When the vows started, disaster struck. "I, Tyler Ashford, take you, Victoria." Tyler stopped. Completely stopped. "Tyler." Victoria hissed. "What are you doing?" He wasn't looking at his bride. He was looking at Diane. Then he stepped down from the altar and walked. Past his gasping mother. Past his father's outstretched hand. Past Victoria's shriek of "Tyler," that echoed off marble walls. Every footstep on that aisle was thunder. 200 guests held their breath. Phone cameras lifted, recording the disaster. Tyler reached Diane's row. And knelt. "Ms. Winters," his voice carried in the dead silence, "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know it was you." Victoria screamed from the altar, "Tyler, what are you?" He ignored her completely. "You're D.W. Winters. Winters Global Solutions. You built every system that runs Ashford Properties. The infrastructure, the security, everything. You own 40% of our operational capacity. You have a kill switch on everything we use." He swallowed hard. "You're essentially my boss. And my family just treated you like trash." The room erupted. Someone gasped, "D.W. Winters? The D.W. Winters." Another voice, "Winters Global is worth billions." Margaret pushed through the crowd, face cycling through shock to horror to desperate damage control. "Ms. Winters, this is all a terrible mistake. We had no idea." Diane stood, her full presence filling the space despite her simple dress. The room fell silent. "That I was rich." She cut Margaret off. "That I was powerful? That I control the technology your empire runs on." She paused, letting it sink in. "The mistake wasn't that you didn't know who I was. The mistake was that you thought it mattered." John stepped forward. "I brought Diane here deliberately. I wanted to see who you really are. You failed spectacularly." Margaret's face went white. "You set us up? I gave you a chance to be decent. You chose cruelty instead." Victoria, still at the altar, shrieked, "Tyler, you're ruining everything over some homeless woman?" Tyler stood from his knees. "I can't marry into a family that thinks cruelty is acceptable as long as the victim seems powerless." He looked at Victoria with something like pity. "You showed me exactly who you are. I'm choosing differently." Diane addressed the room. "I left my company to see if anyone would value me without billions attached. You all answered that question clearly." She turned to leave. John followed immediately. Tyler looked between Victoria and Diane, then made his choice. He followed Diane. Victoria's scream echoed, "Tyler!" He kept walking. The wedding was over. Outside, cool air hit them like absolution. Tyler shook with adrenaline, relief, terror. "Ms. Winters, I'm so sorry. For my family, for everything." "You didn't mock me, Tyler. That matters." Diane's voice was gentle. "You showed decency before knowing who I was. That's the real test." He admitted he'd had doubts about Victoria. She changed when the money got bigger. "I ignored it because of family pressure. I almost became them. But you didn't. You chose better." Diane revealed her plan to return to Winters Global, but differently now. I'll integrate both worlds. The billion-dollar CEO and the shelter volunteer. Both are real. Tyler asked what happened to the company. Your systems are safe. But I need people who understand technology should serve humanity, not exploit it. She paused. You studied computer science before real estate, didn't you? His shock was visible. She was offering him a position. You just walked away from billions for principle. That's rare. John apologized for using her. Diane shook her head. You gave them a chance to be better. They refused. Margaret appeared, trying damage control. Diane shut it down. An apology means nothing if you're only sorry you got caught. Margaret left, defeated. Rosa pulled up in the shelter van. But Diane looked at it, then at John and Tyler, and made a decision. She pulled out her real phone, turned off for 18 months. Time to make some calls. Chapter 9, The Real Currency. 1 month later, Diane sat in her corner office at Winters Global Solutions. Photos from the shelter decorated her desk. Her clothes remained simple but confident. She'd integrated both worlds. At the board meeting, Tyler presented as the new COO. They announced initiatives, tech training for homeless populations, shelter partnerships, affordable housing projects using Diane's technology. We don't just build systems, Diane told the board. We build dignity. Rosa visited, touring the renovated shelter wing Diane had funded. You didn't forget where you came from. I never left. I just expanded. John had cut ties with Margaret and started his own foundation, partnering with Diane on affordable housing. Privilege without responsibility is just waste, he'd learned. Tyler thrived in his new role, volunteering at shelters, dating a teacher instead of society women. I'm learning what real value means. The Ashford family fared poorly. Margaret's attempt to smear Diane backfired when the story went viral as inspiration. Victoria married someone else quickly, another merger. Richard divorced Margaret, seeking his own path. The wedding footage had gone viral, but the narrative wasn't revenge, it was about dignity. Diane still visited the shelter regularly, having coffee with residents. I didn't need to be homeless to learn humanity, but I needed to strip away the noise to hear it. At their regular coffee shop, John asked if she had regrets. Only that it took me 42 years to learn what matters. Tyler leaned forward. What's that? That the only thing you take with you when you leave this world is how you made people feel. The rest is just noise. They watched a homeless woman outside. Tyler immediately offered help, coffee, a meal, genuine kindness. John smiled. Think you changed him? No. I just helped him remember who he was under all that conditioning. As they sat there, 3 people from different worlds united by choice, Diane understood the truth she'd been seeking. Human dignity isn't given by circumstances or status. It's claimed by choice. Every day, in every interaction, we choose whether to see people as things to use or humans to honor. Margaret and Victoria chose poorly. Tyler chose well. And Diane chose to be the test, the mirror, and ultimately the teacher. Because the real currency of life isn't dollars or power, it's how we treat each other when no one's keeping score. That's the legacy that lasts. That's the empire worth building. And in the end, dignity always wins. Months later, Diane stood at a university commencement, addressing graduates. Before you chase success, chase character. Before you build wealth, build integrity. And before you judge anyone by their appearance, their address, or their bank account, ask yourself, what if they're testing me? What if this moment reveals who I really am? Because one day, you'll stand before someone with nothing, and your response will define everything. Choose dignity. Choose humanity. Choose to see people, not statistics. That's the only wealth that matters. The graduates rose in standing ovation. Among them sat 3 scholarship recipients from the shelter, Mrs. Chen's granddaughter, Miguel's nephew, and Shanice, who Diane had helped with that frozen computer so long ago. Full circle. From power to powerlessness to purpose. Diane had found what she'd been searching for. Not in boardrooms or shelters, but in the simple choice to treat every person, regardless of circumstance, with the dignity they deserved. That was the real test. And finally, she'd passed.